Hello, everybody. My name's James. Welcome to another Planet FPL fan view podcast where we welcome one of our correspondents onto the podcast to discuss current matters at their club. For our Crystal Palace correspondent, Rory McLaughlin-Dowd, he has recently seen a first ever trophy in his club's history, or I should say, major trophy. Rory, how are you, mate?
Still basking in the glow of eternal glory, James. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you, mate. Has this sunk in yet?
Not really, no. I mean that's kind of been the main thing I've heard from other Palace fans I've spoken to. They've pretty much just said, I don't actually know what I'm supposed to feel because it's like we don't have a kind of frame of reference for it. I mean, you said it was our first major trophy. We obviously won, like the Zenith Data Systems Cup or the Full Members Cup as it was called, and we've won like the first division or the third division south or whatever. We've won these kind of trophies that maybe are not as held in high regard. But yeah, it's something you really can't conceptualize as a Palace fan and kind of put it in context. And I think it's something we'll be talking about that day for years. So like the first thing my dad said to me at full time was, I didn't think anything like this would happen to us, basically, because he's 68 and he's been supporting the club since we were in the third division south. And he's supported the team through two administrations, two FA Cup final defeats, and yeah, I mean, how many Palace fans support the club for their whole lives and never saw them win anything? And then, they're not with us anymore, so they wouldn't have seen this. And it's it's the kind of thing I think the vast majority of football clubs, maybe not the vast majority of fans, because obviously a lot of fans support the big clubs, but the vast majority of football clubs do go through their entire existence without winning anything that big. So
Yeah, I think there's certainly I mean, even kind of experience from myself in Bilbao, almost feeling like, oh, it's just, we don't really get to have this good day. And kind of speaking to Spencer last week and Sunderland and their many attempts to win games at Wembley and feeling like they're kind of damned never to. And I think outside the kind of the elite, so who regularly win trophies, most fans have that kind of feeling of this doesn't feel like it happens to us. But also, it has for most of the rest of us. It has happened. We can point at that or that. Your team couldn't ever.
yeah, yeah, I know, but so there's almost a kind of generational split. Maybe there's multiple different generations of fans, obviously. So there's my dad's generation for whom the cup is kind of up there with winning the league, but it's also they never thought that we would be in that debate. Then my generation, so I started supporting the team in 1998, and the first thing they did was go into administration, and then we went into administration twice more, and it's promotion and relegation, supporting a yo-yo club. But the thing that we've kind of put up with as a fan base over the last 10 years, say, because we're Premier League consistent, but we're kind of considered steady Eddie kind of mediocrity team, right? So people think that we're kind of like guaranteed as the 12th place club, and we get kind of mocked for that to an extent.
You will have definitely heard it. The people have said, "What's the point of Crystal Palace?"
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's a piece that gets written every so often, and some pundit, it's a slow news week, so they start that debate. Right? And the consideration they'd always say is something like, would you rather be Crystal Palace or Wigan? Because obviously Wigan won the FA Cup, but I think they must have been relegated the week before they won the FA Cup or something, because it's
3 days
usually
later, I think officially.
3 days later
I
after they
think
won the
so.
FA Cup. But it was always they went out with the blaze of glory, they achieved something, they've always got that. But implicit in that is the idea that you're going to end up getting relegated at some point. Whereas I always thought the longer we're in the Premier League, the greater our chance of winning something because you just do build up that. And the gap is so big now with the teams just getting relegated when they get promoted. It's kind of almost like you are going to win something at some point, or in the kind of random variation of football clubs, you will qualify for Europe or something like that. You won't be a what's the point in that team forever. So my generation people younger than me are kind of thinking that we have to invest loads of money to win things. I am just happy to be in the Premier League, but I did think as long as we're in the Premier League, we've got a great chance of winning something.
You were there at Wembley for the semi and the final.
Yeah.
First, I mean, it's worth saying, kind of, most people have forgotten how handsomely you beat Villa in the semi, who had been a great runner themselves at that point, had kind of ran PSG all the way in the Champions League. How impressive was that in the semi-final?
Yeah, I mean that was an incredible performance. I think the thing that impressed me most about it, apart from, the 3-0 scoreline, was um, the way they responded to bad news made me feel like the kind of collective strength in that. team. So I think after the third round game, um, Glasner always had this like foil cup, like you know the FA Cups that people hold up in the stands. He always had that in the corner of the dressing room.
Is
For
that
some
right? Yeah.
reason, yeah, in every single round he brought it to all the away games that we had and stuff like that. Um, and there's a kind of mental strength with that group. Obviously, religion is very important to them. You know, I'm not a religious person, but that's obviously given them some kind of collective togetherness. Um, but for me, it was the way that they responded to all the bad news, all of the bad things that happened. So, for example, in the Villa game, we had the Mateta goal that got disallowed, and then we went and scored immediately afterwards. Then we missed a penalty, and then we went and scored immediately afterwards. And then the board went up for 8 minutes, and as fans, it was like a collective groan that this, obviously they're going to score two goals in this. Are we going to get through extra time? Immediately when you have that negative news as a Palace fan, you're thinking back to when we got relegated because Oldham caught us and we were 9 points ahead of them with 3 games to go and we still went down, or when we got relegated fourth bottom. We're just quite a pessimistic fan base, I think, because all of these unlucky things have happened to us. But the team seems to just respond with resilience when they have bad news and they just bounce back straight away. And then they went and scored the third goal. That performance was great, but for me, it was in like you wouldn't even notice the adversity if you weren't one of the fans whose heart was in their mouth the whole time. Like it was a 3-0 win, but it was still we felt very tense throughout the whole thing.
That's because it's not normal, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Wembley, I think the last time we went to Wembley, I think it was 2021 and we played Chelsea and we just got battered. And then before that was obviously 2016. So, I mean, it's not normal for us to go to Wembley um, for semi-finals, let alone finals. So yeah,
I suppose as well, was it Watford you beat in the semi-final?
yeah,
6-10.
yeah,
And you'd also beaten them in the playoff final when you came back up. Is that right?
yeah, yeah. So that was shortly before, yeah.
But your experiences, because Villa are a big club, you probably hadn't had an experience of beating a big club at a venue like Wembley. Would that be fair to say? Because obviously the two previous cup finals have been Manchester United.
Yeah, yeah. And then obviously the semi in the 90s was at Hillsborough, wasn't it? So it wasn't um
Can't remember who you'd have played
it
in
might have been
90.
Villa Park. We played Liverpool. It was either Villa Park or Hillsborough. It's when they had the semis in the middle of
Oh,
the
Liverpool was at Villa Park. Sorry, yeah.
yeah, yeah, Villa Park, right. So we didn't play them at Wembley.
And
Um
Manchester United, you played at Villa Park in the 90s as well.
yeah, that was when Roy Keane stood on
That's
Southgate's
correct.
yeah.
Nuts. You can say it. I'll say it.
Yeah, so yeah, we don't actually have an experience of beating a club that is um, bigger than us. But then, if you look at the tifos that they put up, I think that those are examples of us beating teams that are bigger than us. Because the tifo for the semi was this kid who got given Andros Townsend's shirt after he scored the goal against City, the screamer. And then in the final, it was beating. It was from Darren Ambrose goal against Man United years ago. That was actually a League Cup quarter final, I think. So that was kind of we have got some history of giant killings to some extent, but
But not
yeah,
on a neutral venue, really.
yeah, and
Probably
not
more the point.
and also for clubs our size, like we're not going to win anything. Like I think the FA Cup is probably the biggest thing we could win. Like we're not going to win the league, I guess. Um,
Leicester.
yeah, but that's
And,
not going to
and
be
and
repeated.
also, perhaps part of this story as well is you know that there was a number of people sort of this time last year going, I think Palace might be dark horses for top four next year. And
Yeah,
you started badly, right?
yeah, we got 3 points from 8 games, which in hindsight I think is actually kind of a good thing to some extent because obviously it kept everyone humble, but also Glasner might have gone like one of those big jobs when they came up. If we'd started this season like we ended last season, Glasner could have been gone by Christmas and we wouldn't have won anything.
So you beat Villa in the semi, City in the final. And obviously, around the time that you played Villa, you'd obviously played City at the Etihad, had this brilliant start, 2-0 up, very nearly 3-0 up, but end up getting well beat. And it was around the period you did have some dodgy results. There was the heavy defeat at Newcastle as well. What was confidence like going into the City game? Because it sort of felt in the build up to it like, are they getting their players back fit?
Mm.
They know what it's like to get over the line here. Is that how you felt going into it, or was there real confidence that you could do it?
I don't know, from far out when it was say 10 days away or a week away, I was like, yeah, there's a inevitability about this. I think you said that at the semi-final on one of your pods with Sid, you were saying, yeah, it does feel like it's just an inevitability that City are gonna pull themselves together and win the cup because City win things. Like that's their recent history, definitely. Funnily enough, I think those two defeats were because we had, I think, 6 clean sheets in a row away from home or something. It was like
You had a
a,
crazy run, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
it
think you
was like
went
a,
all 1-2-0, all of them, I think, if I remember right.
yeah, and it was some kind of record. And then we conceded 10 goals in 2 games. And I think that actually almost helped us. Like that City game, obviously Glasner afterwards said the thing, oh, if you play like this again, I will figure your system out. Which, to be honest, I think is the perfect thing. Honestly, I actually said it in our Matchday Live Slack channel at the time. I said, I think Glasner doesn't want to show too much of a hand here because at halftime it was 2-2 and we changed and we went to this 5-3-2 that we've never played before and we looked absolutely atrocious. And I thought, well, the only explanation for this is that he's experimenting really because he thinks we'll play City again in an important occasion. And obviously they were on the other side of the draw for the FA Cup. So I think he looked at that game and thought, because after that game in the fixtures, we obviously had Forest coming up as well. So if he wanted to experiment against Forest, he would have the other opportunity if they had gone through. So yeah, I think those 2 games where we conceded 10 goals away from home in the space of 4 days actually really helped us because obviously we kept those clean sheets, but you can keep a clean sheet and be quite lucky. Like the opposition can just miss loads of chances and you can keep a clean sheet. And I think we really needed that to bring us back down to earth because we were probably making mistakes in games and that helped us going into we conceded 1 goal in the FA Cup and that was against Millwall.
10-man
Um,
Millwall, and you'd
yeah.
won, basically.
Yeah, and it was deflected, and I mean that was, to be honest, that was maybe the most difficult game we had, apart from City in the final. But yeah, so that actually really helped us. And then their team sheet came out, and I remember thinking because I was listening to podcasts about City doing a rebuild, which they're obviously going through this summer, and they were talking about the system not necessarily working if he wants to play De Bruyne, Bernardo, and Haaland. It doesn't necessarily work with the pressing. And then I looked at the team sheet and that came out and I was like, well, maybe like it's City, like they could score 5 goals against you because City can do that. But equally, I was looking at that like, maybe that does favour us a little bit because they
Yeah,
can't.
the team came out and it was like they're either going to absolutely blow you away or they're in massive trouble. And the comment I made afterwards, but once the teams had come out, it was like City had to score first with the team lineup that they'd picked, or they were in huge trouble. And actually, to be fair, they started really well in the opening
Yeah.
10 minutes or so. Can you remember what was going through your mind at that point in the opening 10 minutes or so? Because you barely got out your box, mate.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking it can't go on like this.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've not sat next to me at a Palace match, but it's even worse a final or any kind of big game. But I honestly, to any neutral observer, I looked like I was being electrocuted because the entire left side of my body was just shaking for 105 minutes or however long the game was. But I remember watching us try to play out, and I obviously didn't have the radio commentary. I've listened to it back obviously 100 times, but they were criticizing us for the way we were building from goal kicks, and I was looking at it going, we're clearly trying something from goal kicks here because we're building out, going to the right, and then they were pressing in a certain way, and it wasn't working, and we were clearly trying to get Mateta isolated up against Gvardiol, and Sarr was going somewhere completely different. And I think he was going over to the left where Ake and Diaz were. So we were doubling up on that side so Mateta could be isolated. And I was thinking, why are we doing this? This is a bit weird. Like the first goal we scored against City in the league game, they were like, we had the ball for about 2 minutes. Like Eze scored this goal, which ended up being basically the same thing. Munoz on that channel squaring it to Eze. But we must have put together like 40 or 50 passes, keeping the ball and playing it around. And we just weren't doing that. I was confused as to what we were doing. But in hindsight, it's clear if Palace play City, we're if we're going to play with set pieces, right? If we were Allardyce or Pulis Palace, people would criticize us and say, "Oh, you're just playing for set pieces" or something like that. But they looked at it and thought, "What is the set piece that we're most likely to have?" Well, for Palace, if it goes very badly, the set piece we're most likely to have against Man City is kickoffs, and the set.
That would be really bad.
Yeah, but then when they scored, what was the one where Gundogan scored in like the first minute? And they literally had a set piece move set up from a kickoff and they won the FA
Oh,
Cup.
against Forest in the semi-final, wasn't it? Basically, yeah.
No, I think it was a couple of years ago in the final, and they scored in
Oh,
like the
against Manchester United when they went direct.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and Gundogan scored in the first minute, and it was like everyone was praising them for having a set piece set up from the center circle, and they were like from kickoff. Well, that's another type of set piece. Well, for us, the set piece we're most likely to have against City is a goal kick. So I was watching that, and then we tried to play out to the right, and it didn't work. And then we played out to the left, and literally the first time we play out to the left, we scored the goal because they must have changed their pressing to go from that side, and then we swapped back to the right, and then played through them immediately. But then it was just back to the wall the whole thing, the rest of the game, and it was just impossible. Honestly, I've watched that game so many times. I've watched it like 3 or 4 times, and it's been a month or something. But like, I couldn't sit through another way of winning a cup like that or a big game like that again. It was torture.
Why? Because you didn't think you'd hold on because you thought City would score. What was it specifically?
For me, it was like every time I looked up at the clock, it had barely moved, and I
Well,
knew it
that's
was,
normal.
and I knew it was wrong because we spent so much time wasting with players down on the floor. I
You know
looked
there's
up,
additional time coming.
yeah, so I was like, it's the 65th minute, but it's probably actually the 58th minute or something like that because Wharton had been down for ages. Gay went down. Gay fractured his eye socket or something like that. And event like he was playing with one eye for like 10 minutes. I don't even know how we didn't concede in that period of time. So yeah, I they didn't really like I can't remember Henderson making too many good saves, but they just had the ball in our third of the pitch for like 80% of the game. But we've done that before against them, I guess, and been successful. We've also done that before against them and lost 5-0. So,
Did you watch the brilliant Europa League final?
yes.
Did you think that Manchester United would equalise?
Um, I thought that no, I thought that eventually them just punting the ball up there, something would fall, but they had no like conviction in actually doing anything in the final third.
So I'm obviously in the ground. I think they're going to score.
Yeah, yeah,
You were at Wembley shitting yourself. And I can remember I was watching the final with my father, and we both said with 20 minutes to go, it's Palace winning this. Look
yeah,
comfy as, mate.
yeah. But I think that's what Suj left like turned it off at half time. I remember listening to your
He
podcast
said he
again.
was so confident he were going to win. I
Yeah,
don't know why he
well,
turned it off, weirdo, but
I think he went out and did something. To be fair.
well, you can't call people weirdos anymore. I read that. Sorry, carry on.
If there's any insult you could probably still get away with, is that one, surely.
Just my job's under pressure. Go on, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. So I didn't feel like because it's one of those things like City can just have a random regen player from nowhere who just scores and then we're not going to win in extra time, are we? Like it was more that thought, but then we obviously scored that. So the second goal that got disallowed, I knew immediately it was disallowed, and I didn't know why. It's just because it looked wrong. Like you know when you're watching a football match and something happens and you're like, this doesn't quite add up here. Something's happened. I knew immediately. Everyone else was cheering, and I was just like immediately opening up my phone to go on Twitter and the Matchday Slack just to see what everyone else was saying because I was pretty sure at that point that that was not going to stand.
You were right. Fair game to you.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah,
That
if it,
emotion, that emotion at the final whistle.
my emotion at the final whistle wasn't even like this elation. I like hugged the guy next to me, but both guys next to me who I'd never met before because I didn't have enough points. I was living in South Africa for the first like 2/3 of the year, so I didn't have enough points on my account to get a ticket, and I got it through one of my dad's mates. But I was kind of on my own, but I knew where my dad was sitting because I had to print his ticket off. So my immediate response was, I have to go and find my dad to actually enjoy it. So I found his seat on my email and then just ran and found him. And then he was just like, I didn't think this would ever happen.
That's amazing, mate.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like I was thinking about this the other day. If we'd done this last season, I wouldn't have seen it because I was in Cape Town.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess that's quite lucky, but I also didn't necessarily put in the hard yards. Like a lot of Palace fans maybe didn't get to go to the final, but may have gone to like more games than me this season. So I feel kind of
Were
lucky.
you able to, when it's happening, because it's the first time it happened to you, are you kind of aware of your surroundings and the scale of the achievement? Or is it
Well,
just all too still kind of, you almost said like still doesn't feel like real?
yeah, and I think for most Palace fans, that's the reality of it. Like we don't really know. Like the oldest cup in the world has got our name on it somewhere, and that's something that like so if I always thought that we would if we were to do something, it would be the FA Cup because the FA Cup is kind of the reason the club exists to some extent. Because there's a form of Crystal Palace that was founded in 1861 and they played in the original FA Cup that was in 1872. Then they stopped existing in the 1880s. But we hosted the FA Cup from I think 1895 to 1913. That was hosted in Crystal Palace. So that was almost like Wembley before Wembley. And then they were like, well, there's obviously enough supporters here for there to be a football team. So let's create Crystal Palace Football Club again. So we kind of exist because the FA Cup exists to an extent. So it always felt like if we were going to do something, it would be there. Because the other thing is, we're only good after Christmas. We always start badly, and that's just something we've always done.
So Eze doesn't play when the sun comes out in August. It's just April onwards, is it? Oh,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
okay.
But
Did you?
which makes it kind of surprising that we've not won anything before, because that's the business end of the season. And that's the only bit we show up for.
Yeah, but you've got to get to the quarterfinal or the semi-final. And I was going to say, did you get a vibe during your League Cup run that something might be on in the cup competitions this year? You obviously got to the quarterfinal of the League Cup. You were 1-0 up at Arsenal and lost. But even in that competition, Glasgow was picking quite strong teams, wasn't he?
Yeah, he
Did you
was.
get that vibe that the cup competitions were going to get treated really seriously? Because it's a big frustration for most of us neutrals who see, with all due respect, clubs like yours who normally finish around mid-table, who are always going to be safe, but probably not qualify for Europe. And then the FA Cup comes around and it's like you pick a rotated team. And that's where
Yeah.
the frustration comes round of, and what's the point of Palace
Yeah, yeah.
or a another?
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I think my feeling watching the early rounds of the League Cup was we got 3 points from 8 games. So he's almost using that to try to play some players into form, get some confidence, score some goals. Like we signed Nketiah and then he scored against QPR, but he wasn't performing in the league. So him scoring against maybe lesser opposition in those competitions. And also Kamada. I mean, Kamada scored against Villa in the cup, scored the winner, and there was kind of a feeling then that he would get some confidence from that and progress. So at the time I thought he was kind of using the League Cup to get form into the players who were out of form. But yeah, I think I also feel that frustration that people aren't trying for cups, and I think because the relegation is how it is now, where the three newly promoted teams very likely to go down. I don't know the next time that the three promoted teams will stay up. If you have a start to the season like we had, you should just go all out for the cup because someone like so West Ham and Wolves and Everton were the three teams who are maybe down there with us um, at that time in January. If they find themselves in that position around the turn of the year, they should definitely be going for the FA Cup because chances are they're not going to go down.
Yeah, I mean, you would think actually, I mean, it might be different next year, subject to what the free promoted clubs do. But yeah, you're right. I think most probably Wolves, I would say, were probably really still looking over their shoulder. I think, and actually Everton would have been as well. Trying to think back to January, I went to Everton in January, and they were pretty worried at that point.
Mm.
David Moyes had just taken over, so you can understand it a little bit. I think West Ham would think we're probably going to be all right by that point.
Yeah, but historically, I mean, the last two seasons have been different, but saying we should have been going for the FA Cup like 5 or 6 years ago, it's obviously a different calculation for the people in the club because relegation is so bad. The other element is when we got to the semi-final last time, it was Chelsea, Liverpool, Man City. So we had the European champions, the team that won the league the previous season, and the team that was top of the league. So you can say, oh, we're going all out for it. We did have a decent draw up until the quarterfinal stage that actually got us into the position where we could go for it.
Whereas this time, I think when you referred earlier to me saying about City will probably go on and win it, I'm pretty sure I said that before the quarterfinals, Rory,
Right.
because obviously the quarterfinal lineup was, it looked like it was so open, wasn't it? And even City had drawn Bournemouth away, who was in good form at the time of the draw. I'm thinking
Yeah.
they could go. So for the likes of yourselves, Forest, Villa, it was like it was wide open for everybody. Fulham, who or you obviously beat in the
Preston.
quarterfinal. Brighton were in there. I know you want a reminder of that. Brighton aren't going to play European football next season, are they, Rory?
I don't think so, no. I'm optimistic not. Certainly the club seems to be optimistic, but it would be typical Palace. So, in I was looking this up the other day. In 1991, we finished third in the first division,
Yep.
and we didn't get to play in Europe because we'd been banned for 5 years because of like hooliganism and Heysel and everything. So our coefficient was zero. So only first and second got into Europe, third didn't get into Europe. So that was a time when we could have qualified for Europe in the past, but obviously we picked the one year where that didn't actually get Europe. So yeah, I think
Sorry,
we
mate.
should be okay. So I've looked into it. I
Just
look,
for those who don't know at all what we're talking about, just give a little bit of a background. Obviously, as FA Cup winners, you automatically go into the group stage of Europa League. But essentially, in short, because of John Textor primarily,
yeah,
there is a little bit of an issue here where you might not, right?
yeah. So he owns, or so he's got 65% of 55% of Eagle Holding, which has a 43% stake in Palace and a 79% stake in Lyon. And Lyon qualified by finishing sixth in the league, which should only have got Conference League, but Paris Saint-Germain won the French Cup. So then Lyon went into the Europa League, which then means that there's a potential conflict in terms of him having control of two clubs in the same competition. Obviously, a lot of people at home listening will be thinking, well, Man City own loads of clubs, Red Bull obviously exists, and Man United had Nice and so on. So surely that's not really a problem. They have very specific provisions related to what is actually the case. So I went through it, and it looks like the relevant point is Article 501C, which says they're not allowed to have, no individual can have a majority of shareholder voting rights, right to appoint members of an administrative body, majority of voting rights, or the ability to exercise decisive influence in the decision making of the club. So I think we're fine on most of those, but it's the fourth point, decisive influence, which could be an issue. But then decisive influence, what does that actually mean? Like it's one of those legal phrases where you could interpret this like 10 different ways.
So, Texter, as part of Eagle Holdings, has his ownership been diluted at all over the last couple of weeks? Has that happened or not?
So he's diluted his personal ownership of Eagle Holdings so that his personal ownership is under 30%.
Correct.
But I think that doesn't matter so much because the relevant entity is Eagle Holdings, which maintains the same percentage.
So that's what over 40.
Yeah, so that's 43% of Palace. And they
Right.
say so 30% is a kind of um, threshold for decisive influence. But then,
But Texter, in terms of this is where it's really ambiguous. So, because Texter's voting right at Palace is only 25%, right?
exactly, yeah. So that relates to what is called substance over form. So in theory, like on the face of it, he has 43% of Palace, but in actual fact, he has 25% voting control over Palace according to the constitution of the club. And then if there's a tie because there's four owners with 25% voting, it could be 50-50. So then what do you do? Then Steve Parish has the deciding vote. So he effectively has 24.9% of the club. And then he's basically spent the last few years trying to sell his stake, saying he's got the most expensive season ticket in football. So he's simultaneously trying to sell his stake using a methodology which calculates like three times revenue. So he's trying to charge this exorbitant price for his stake, but at the same time bad mouthing the value of what he bought in the
Mm.
press all the time. So the major issue, he's a donut.
I think the multi-club ownership law is essentially there to stop a person having deciding influence control over two clubs within the same competition. And I think most of us could be on board and go, yeah, okay. And actually, there are other scenarios where an ownership has been diluted to make sure even appear, I think it's fair to say,
Yeah.
that someone doesn't have control of a certain club. John Textor has no power over Crystal Palace.
Yeah, pretty.
That's my abiding point on this. And for me, there should be no denial. Sorry to the Brighton fans. There should be no denial of your football club to play in Europe.
Yeah, I think so as well. And it's also, I think we would drop down into the Conference League, not be,
But you can't, right? Of that
well,
either. That's because of the other fellow who's got ownership in Bromby, isn't it?
yeah, Blitzer, but he owns 15% of Bromby. So if
Okay.
they're saying that 30% is decisive influence. If they're saying 30% of shares is a threshold for that, he only owns 15%, so presumably that's not decisive influence.
Would you
I
rather
don't
be in the Conference League than the Europa League?
know
Why?
because I listened to the Price of Football and Kieran Maguire said that that's actually probably a net negative for a football club. Whereas, but you break even when you get to the quarterfinals of the Europa League. If you go out in the group stage of the Europa League, it's still actually a negative because of the amount you have to pay out in bonuses and so on. I'd obviously rather be in the Conference League than nothing, but I'd definitely rather be in the Europa League than the Conference League.
Conference League is easy to win,
Yeah, it probably is. I don't know where I'd have to travel to though.
but
Uh,
then you've just comfortably finished above a team that won the Europa League, mate. So you'd be capable of winning that as well. It's clear
as
now.
as did everyone else who stayed in the league, James.
That's also true. I didn't want to mention that, but you did. No, it would be a desperate shame if you're not allowed to play in. When do we expect a resolution of this? Do we know?
End of this month, so I guess 2 weeks. But it can go to CAS afterwards. But I think CAS is like what you would appeal to. So I think it only goes to CAS if it goes against us and then we appeal. I think if it goes in our favour, I'm not
You're
sure
in.
UEFA. Yeah, I'm not sure UEFA are going to appeal. I don't know if
Nah.
it's possible for a third party to come in and appeal on their behalf. But,
Are you suggesting someone at Forest might?
well, who would that be, James? As far as I know, those shares are in a blind trust. So
I'll tell you what I'm
that's
more interested in now, and I don't know if you know any of this, because my understanding with Lyon, and me and Suja covered this on particularly on our Patreon podcast, they were given a provisional relegation
yep,
from Ligue 1 with the proviso that they had to find 200 million essentially by what the summer to pay off money owed. Now, we suspected that possibly the sale of what he owns of your football club would probably cover that off. Right,
yeah.
that's not happening at the moment. So, a Leon fucked here.
So they were provisionally disqualified from Europe because they have overdue fees. And then they've got a separate thing going on in France. I don't know if they got relegated from Ligue 1. That might not affect their European standing at all. They might still be able to play in Europe even if they got kicked out of Ligue 1. Or
They might choose to withdraw under that sort of circumstance, though, mate,
they
from a
probably should
financial
do.
perspective.
I mean, that's what makes it kind of interesting what is happening with Forest now, because I think a lot of those transfers are an attempt to make Lyon a viable entity so that
The,
they can be
the,
in the
the,
Europa
the
League.
reason Forest are getting linked into this is Texter also owns Botafogo,
Yeah,
who are in the Club World Cup at the moment. Had a good result last night from our time recording against Seattle Sounders, and actually, his Botafogo have done very well. They've won the Brazilian league. Um, so they're in the Club World Cup. They're selling free players to Forest. Okay, fine. They're selling free players to Forest. No big deal. But the fact that Textor and Marinakis keep having these links is somewhat bizarre
yeah,
because Leon, who are in financial trouble, keep buying players from Forest,
yep,
including, I think they've now agreed a deal for Matt Turner, haven't they? Who you
yep.
just had on loan, ironically.
FA
He's
Cup champion, Matt Turner.
FA Cup champion, but is obviously their player. They'd also paid quite a bit for Niakate previously. And the really bizarre one that none of us can get our heads around is you've got a club that's in financial peril, gave Forest a sizable chunk of money for Oral Mangala last summer, and then
Yep.
just sent him straight on loan to Everton.
Yeah, yeah.
It
I
doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense. So, I mean, it's difficult to know who's taking advantage of who or who's seeing a weak point where or where the real money is coming
Well,
from.
I
But
think Marinakis knows what he's doing. I'm not sure that Texter does.
I mean, Texter doesn't know anything. But it's possible that Texter is kind of taking advantage of that situation to keep his club afloat as well. But it's the same with Botafogo. Botafogo also had two cases where they have installments due for transfers. One of them to Burnley. So Burnley have also reported them to FIFA.
Yeah, this is for Vitinho,
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
Um, and they have another one with an MLS team, and then they're claiming that the MLS as a whole, the league, owes them money because other teams in the MLS owe them money. So that they don't actually owe the money to the MLS side that they owe money to. I don't know. He's he's a bit of a chancer, I think, essentially, Texter. I mean, he got called a cowboy by someone in the French league and then went on the pitch with a cowboy hat. So I think, I mean, the ownership of the club is something that in my opinion, is holding the club back to quite an extent.
It feels like he doesn't really want ownership of Palace as well. We know that he tried to make the purchase of Everton Football Club as
Yeah.
well. Is there any concern that he goes for a full takeover of Palace?
Historically, there was. So the news this morning was that he's listed Eagle Football Holdings on the um, stock exchange, I think. So they
Okay,
had an IPO. I don't think he has the cash to do it. But the way his multi-club model works is he basically sees everything as shared. So all of the revenues from all of the clubs and all of the assets from all of the clubs are just one pot, is the way that he sees it. And then I think he just tries to move things around between the clubs and takes advantage of the fact that there'll be different deadlines for complying with different financial regulations. So that's as far as I can see it. He's trying to move things between clubs to abide by regulations at different times. But I don't think he's capable of taking over Palace, and I also think Harrison Blitzer won't sell their shares. We do have some sort of smaller minority shareholders, but I think he does have to buy out Harrison Blitzer because Parish has 10% and they both have 18%, I think, Harrison Blitzer. So that would be, well, that would only take 46%. And then there's, yeah, there are some other minority shareholders, but they're not selling to him either.
you have been linked with investment from America over the last couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, two different consortiums. So there's one which involves Sports Bank, which was one that was linked with us in January, I think, as well. And two guys who are claiming to be Palace fans, but then you go back to their social media accounts from like 2018 and they're like Liverpool and Arsenal fans. And also, I think an NBA player is involved in that. And then the other one is Woody Johnson, who was Trump's ambassador to the UK during his last,
Nice.
yeah. Um,
So you want to keep Texter, do you?
oh my God, I don't know. That is the thing with Palace. It's like we need a change, but not that change. It's like basically any option we have for a change. It's like we need a change, but not that one.
Talking of change, stadium redevelopment is off at the moment as well, is it?
Yeah, so that was something that was initially scheduled for before COVID. They got planning approval in 2018, and then COVID happened, so they put it off. Then obviously after COVID, there was this massive inflation, so it went from 100 million to 200 million. Now they're saying it's 250 million, so they're going to try and look to do something else. And in hindsight, the best time to do it was during COVID because they wouldn't have lost any attendance. So they should have done that then. But the owners, basically
Guess there was
Harrison,
a lot of unknowns at that point. Like, are fans even coming back, or
yeah,
who
and also
knows?
they're private equity investors, Harrison Blitzer, so they're both would have their kind of cash piles exposed to a lot of risk. And if there's a lot of uncertainty in the market, they might not actually have the cash available. But they definitely should have done it then because we could be going into the Europa League with a 34,000 seat stadium and much improved corporate facilities and everything to generate more capital to then invest and take the step forward. But as it stands this summer, we've lost our COO, our CFO, and our director of football. So they've all been replaced, except for the director of football. Actually, Dougie Freeman hasn't been replaced. But it feels like we're at a kind of massive inflection point for the club. So if we hadn't won the FA Cup, I think it could have been um, quite an uneasy time to be a fan of Palace because I think a lot's going to change over the next 12
I'm
months either way.
looking forward to seeing an away set of European fans in the half weight stand, Rory. I'm looking forward to seeing this.
Yeah, yeah. Those are not really well, I think it would be funnier if
We
someone
shouldn't be because it might not be funny.
yeah. Well they're looking into what they have to do to try and comply. But I mean look, there must be some shithole grounds around Europe that are comparable to Selhurst
I
Park.
tell you where I think you'll get away with it is you've only got to give away 5%, haven't you,
Yeah.
in Europe
So
of
they might move
capacity.
them. Yeah, I
So
think
I think you might even just let them have all that area
mm.
and just you're restricting your own capacity essentially.
Well they were talking about giving them the so as you sit in the away bit, the stand to the right, the like tiny stand, just giving them the bottom of that and then the
Oh, at
home
the
fans.
Sainsbury's end.
Yeah, the Sainsbury's end.
We'd rather just have that in the Premier League as well.
Yeah, but no, no, you're going to have to look at everyone's ankles and try and work out where the ball's going to land at a goal kick like everyone else.
Great. Anyway, before we finish, um, will all these players, assuming you do get in Europa League, will all these players still be with you? And I guess the manager as well.
Yeah. So the manager's got a year left, and to be honest, I'm actually kind of happy that he has a year left because it means he can really kind of hold their feet to the fire over a lot of these these issues, like actually spending money to strengthen the squad in Europe, because I think if they could get away without doing it, then they would. So I think because he's got some leverage, that could actually be quite good for us. The players, Gay's got a year left. I'm was optimistic that they could maybe sell it to him and say, look, we'll give you 1 year contract extension, so you have 2 years left, and you have a buyout next summer for like 40 million or something. But you will captain us in Europe, our first season in Europe, and obviously the World Cup's after that, and you don't have to change environment, so you know that you're going to get games, so you have a good chance of getting in that squad. There's also some suggestions that he will just wind his contract down and go for a free, because then he can pick which club he goes to and also be on effectively a massive contract.
Salary, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which would be funny because obviously Chelsea have a sell on, so then they get nothing. So that would be fun.
Probably it'd still end up at Chelsea, you know that, don't
Yeah,
you?
probably. Yeah. And then Eze, I think Eze will probably stay. I think his buyout is 68 million. So for any club that wants to buy him, that would be,
Keep hearing that this he has a release clause, but you keep hearing attached to it, but it's complicated. Like
yeah. It's
a
the same with
release clause
Elise.
is a release clause, or what is it with this?
I don't know. I guess it's something like, well, with Elise, there was a suggestion that it was Champions League clubs only. So if a team that wasn't in the Champions League um, applied, they wouldn't be able to trigger the release clause. I don't know. There was something like there has to be an agreement between the player and the club that it's right for him to leave or something like that was, but
Okay.
that's not a release clause.
Well, the
So
club's
yeah,
not going to agree to it, are
yeah. I can't remember what it was with the Elise, but there was something funky in there, which basically
they?
meant
Okay.
that he would only go to Bayern or something in the end.
So you're hopeful that the squad will essentially, and Oliver Glasner will stay this year.
Yeah,
But then I guess there's concerns, isn't there? And it's not just even the people you mentioned, also other people like Adam Wharton, etc., as well in the longer term. What you don't want to do is lose them all in one hit. Would be
yeah,
if you're losing like one figure a year and you're replacing like you have done with people like Eze Elise, you'll continue to grow and build. I guess buying players at the moment is probably a little bit awkward because people are going to, well, are you in Europe or aren't you? Is going to be a question at the moment, isn't it?
yeah. We got a goalkeeper this weekend just gone, the PSV. I think it was the first choice at PSV. So we've got him in to replace Turner. But yeah, it's going to be difficult to sign players until we know what we're doing in Europe. But it's also going to be difficult to know what money we have available and so on. There's some talk that we have some things lined up, but I don't know. I think we will keep it relatively cheap because from our perspective, it doesn't make sense to spend that much money doing it if we've only got Europe for 1 year. So I think they are relatively intelligent in their recruitment in terms of finding
But
players
it
for
doesn't have to
freeze.
be, does it? Because like qualifying for Europe via the league is not beyond your means, mate.
Yeah, it depends on other teams, but I guess like a lot of the teams that we were competing with last season have lost players, haven't they? So like Bournemouth obviously have their big issue, but that's and Brentford as well. But the thing is, we need to buy loads of defenders because we play five at the back and we don't have that much depth there. But then Bournemouth have just got loads of money and they also need defenders, so they'll probably be shopping in the same market as us. So that's a bit of a nightmare. Yeah, we could do it in the league, but could we do it in the league while we've got two cups and Europe? I don't think so.
One final question before we finish. Um, there's obviously clubs who have won trophies this year have been waiting quite a while. Newcastle, obviously, namely, and I heard it mentioned with Newcastle, and I understand why, because it's been so long since they won a trophy, that the players part of that squad are now legends. Is this now the greatest Crystal Palace team of all time?
It probably is. Yeah, I was thinking it through. I think you can go through position by position and there would be better players or maybe only three or four of them would get in. But as a team, it's the best team we've ever had. Yeah. But I would still say like it is because I saw people put something online like Eze is Palace's greatest ever player. When it's like, well, Wolf, given what Wolf did for the club for so long, basically this doesn't happen without Wolf to some extent. And then Ian Wright's obviously possibly our greatest player.
Yeah, players can't just be defined by trophies. You know, no
Yeah.
one loved Dominic Solanke, but no one's going to say he's a better forward than Harry Kane was for Tottenham because
Yeah.
Solanke won a trophy and Kane didn't. You can't just be completely defined just by the trophies. But I guess this group of players is always going to be attached as the first group of players that won a trophy for Crystal Palace, right? So even people newer into the club like Lacroix, for example,
Yeah.
possibly going to get remembered as a legend in the future, right?
Yeah, even maybe Matt Turner will be the best second choice goalkeeper in our history.
Slightly different. I should shout out Dean Henderson because you know I'm a critic of him. I think he had an
Yeah.
outstanding season, and obviously big save in the final. In that moment, did you fancy him?
I did. Like I thought he was going to save that penalty before it happened. Um, but I didn't think he would save it when it was Haaland. So when Haaland was there, I was like, yeah, robot goal. But then he gave the ball to Marmoush, and I was like, for some reason, I just felt, and it's one of those kind of out of body experience moments where you kind of see it happen before it happens. Like I don't actually know, is my memory the actual thing that happened, you know? But yeah, I felt confident that Henderson would save it. The thing is with Henderson is he will always make those ridiculous saves, but then he will often do what he did against Forest away, where he does just kind of chuck one in as well. So maybe that's why he's Palace's goalkeeper.
I think he had a good season, mate. Rory, thank you very much, and congratulations again, and congratulations to all our Crystal Palace viewers and listeners. Ask James for you tomorrow, scheduled for 3 p.m. UK time, and of course, tomorrow we have got the fixtures out for our patrons, and this includes all members, including free members. There will be a stream with myself that starts at 8:45 a.m. tomorrow morning. Just leaves me to say thanks very much, Rory. Look forward to seeing you correspondent week, which will kick off on August the 4th. Be nice to each other, everyone. Cue music, please, man. Sharp.